This past winter, the fifth grade basketball team I coach was down by two with barely any time left on the clock, and my son stepped up to the free throw line with a chance to tie the game. On the outside, I looked like any other coach, calm, collected, invested in the moment. But on the inside, I was just a mom hoping he could handle the moment. And I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that wanted to make the pressure disappear, to take that burden off his shoulders. I couldn't. And you know what? I'm glad that I couldn't. I'm Sam. Welcome back to another episode of Locker Talk, where we talk about youth sports and how the behaviors we observe in our athletes can become what they need to perform at their best today and the life skills they need to lead tomorrow. When adults learn to read, reset, and respond instead of reacting, we can expand the potential of who our athletes can become. Now, we've all watched someone we care about face these kinds of pressure-filled moments. And have you noticed how those moments seem to slow time down? Suddenly everyone gets quiet, every bounce of the ball feels louder. You know they've made hundreds of free throws before, but this one feels different. And as their parent or coach, or both, you're just hoping it goes well. But here's what I think most of us get wrong. We think the pressure is the problem. We think that if our athlete could just feel less nervous, feel less of the pressure, they'd play better. But after years of observing athletes and working with adults in high pressure leadership roles, I just don't think that's true. I think pressure is information. And once I started looking at it that way, it completely changed how I led, how I coached, how I parented, and honestly, how I looked at my own life. Maybe your athlete looks completely different in practice than they do in the game. In practice, they're confident, they're relaxed, they're aggressive. Then game day comes and suddenly they tighten up. Maybe they stop taking the chances they'd normally take. Maybe they hesitate before they make a decision. Maybe they overthink things they've done hundreds of times before. Maybe they make mistakes that leave you scratching your head because you know they're capable of so much more. Or maybe they just don't look like themselves. And as parents, it's really easy to look at those moments and think something like they just can't handle the pressure. And I get it. I've done that before myself. But over time, I've realized that's usually not what's happening. Pressure isn't showing us some, you know, issue in our athletes' game time ability. It's showing us what's still developing in them, right? These are youth sports. These are young athletes. We are still growing, still developing. Hopefully, we're still doing that for all of our life. But when you look at it, when you look at pressure as something, as revealing not some issue or something that we need to work out of our athlete, and you look at it as just information, it's a really important difference. Because if we think of pressure as the enemy, we'll spend our energy trying to remove it, right? How do we um, get them to feel it less? How do we lessen, those moments? But if pressure is just information, now we have something we can actually work with and help our athlete with. One thing I've noticed, whether I'm coaching kids or working with adults, is that pressure changes what we pay attention to. Instead of focusing on what they need to do, athletes start thinking about what might happen. They think about making a mistake, about disappointing their coach, about letting their teammates down, about what everyone in the stands might be thinking, about winning, about losing. Their attention slowly shifts from the process that they need to be following to the outcome. And when that happens, performance usually changes. Now, notice what I didn't say. I didn't say that pressure shows up and it creates all these behaviors, turns our athlete into someone totally different. Pressure doesn't create the behaviors, it reveals them. And that's one of the core ideas behind really everything I teach, I write, I talk about online, is that pressure doesn't create behavior, it reveals behavior. And it reveals how an athlete responds when expectations rise, when emotions get bigger, and when uncertainty enters the game. And the good news, those responses aren't fixed. They're developable, right? This is how they respond right now, not how they will respond for forever. And that's really the whole point here. And here's where it gets really interesting. Two athletes can stand on the same free throw line in the exact same game during the exact same in the exact same gym and experience that moment completely differently. One athlete starts to overthink every decision, another misses, the first shot and can't, mentally recover to make the second. Someone else may become so worried about missing or so worried about making a mistake that they don't put their whole effort into the shot to begin with. And another athlete might get so frustrated so quickly that one mistake affects, the next three possessions, right? Everything that happened on this free throw line might affect everything in the rest of their game. And then you'll have other kids that just check out completely. And from the outside, those all just look like pressure, right? Oh, pressure is this problem that created their, reaction that we view as negative. But underneath these experiences that our athletes are going through are completely different patterns. And that's why generic advice usually falls so short because different patterns, different internal things that are going on require different kinds of development, different kinds of support. Now, if you're like me, when you see your athlete struggling under pressure, your first instinct is to help. I think that just happens for any well-intentioned adult. Of course it is, right? Like nobody wants to watch, watch a kid struggle. No coach enjoys watching an athlete freeze in a big moment. And so we jump in and we say things like, just don't think about it, relax, it's just another game. Or right before the game starts, we remind them of all the things they've been working on. Remember, how you've been working on your form, how you've been working on, this or that or whatever. And all of those things come from a really good place. We want to help. But sometimes we accidentally add to the pressure. Like, think about it. If your athlete is already worried about making a mistake, telling them not to think about it doesn't actually give their brain something useful to focus on. It just reminds them that there's a chance they'll mess up. Or if we tell them it's just another game, they know it's not, else you wouldn't have said it, right? If it really is just another game, they wouldn't be feeling all of these feelings in the first place. You can't talk somebody out of pressure. And honestly, we just shouldn't even try because pressure, like I said, is not the enemy here. Pressure is where growth happens. It's where athletes begin building self-trust. This is the beauty of youth sports. It gives our kids hundreds of moments to safely practice and learn that they can move through something difficult. And that's the foundation of lifelong confidence in difficult situations. So instead of trying to make the moment smaller, trying to take that pressure away, help your athlete focus on help your athlete make their focus smaller, right? Help them zoom in. I always say when we feel stressed out, when we feel the pressure, we have two options. We zoom in to what we need to do, or we zoom out to the big picture. Usually in sports, in a moment like a big game, you don't want to zoom out because you're like, this is becomes too big, too large of a moment. And so what you want to help them with is to zoom in and really focus their attention from the wide lens of this game, this big moment into what they can do, right? We don't want them thinking about the score, the crowd, the coach, winning, losing, all of that. Our job is to help them zoom back in, not to the outcome, but to their next behavior, their next action. What's the next right thing? Maybe it's sprinting back on defense. Maybe it's communicating with a teammate. Maybe it's resetting after a mistake. Maybe it's taking the next open shot instead of worrying about the last one. Maybe it's simply taking a deep breath and getting ready for the next play. These are things they can actually do, right? We want them to have something to move towards, not something to move away from. Like, we're not going to move away from the fact this is a big moment. We want to move towards what's the thing you can do? What's the next right move, the next play? And something interesting happens when athletes and humans in general begin focusing on behaviors instead of outcomes. The moment doesn't necessarily become easier, it becomes clearer. Now they have a job to do, they have an action to take, and eventually those behaviors, if repeated enough, become habits. If we have an athlete over and over again, zoom in, focused on what the next thing is, that becomes their default response when the world gets too big, when the pressure raises too much. And I also think that some of the most important coaching happens after the game, right? We help kids before, we help them in the moment, but after the game is where you really solidify and bring lessons fully around. And it is so tempting to talk about the score, the win, the points, the missed opportunities, the mistakes, the things that, like, you want to help them work on, right? Like, again, it comes from this place of wanting to help them be the best they can, have the best opportunities they possibly can. But instead of focusing on the outcomes, right? What happens because of all the work they put in. Focus on the work, focus on the behaviors, focus on the things they can control. So I like to say things like, I loved how quickly you got back on defense after that turnover. Like, great job. That's what we need. Or I notice you kept encouraging teammates when things are going your way, right? You were the loudest voice on the court today. Love that. That helps everybody stay in the game and really, play at their best. Be specific. When we are specific, our athletes learn what success actually looks like. We reinforce the behaviors and the actions that are controllable, that they can repeat, that help them continue to stay in the game and keep their love of it alive. So when you go into that compliment mode, which is like our first default, right? As soon as the game's over, we want to go into the advice, whether good, negative, or neutral. So focus on the actions that they took. And again, the specificity is key here. Then I like to get really curious with them. So instead of asking like, oh, what happened on that one play where, you turn the ball over? What happened on that shot? You've made that shot a million times. Like what happened on that one? Right? None of that. I ask things like, were there any moments today that felt like a lot of pressure? What helped you stay in the game after that one turnover? What would you like to do differently next time? And then one of my favorites is just like, hey, what did that game pressure today, teach you? What did you learn about yourself? What were you feeling? What were you thinking, right? Really sit in curiosity, wonder a bit about what your kid was experiencing and what they were thinking and what they were feeling and what they were going for. And the questions as you start this might feel a little awkward, but they'll get easier and you'll find the right ones that resonate with your kids as you go. But sit in that curiosity. And then when they tell you something, ask them, "Oh, tell me more about that," right? Like dig a little deeper, get into, really the core of what they're thinking, what they're feeling, because then that gives you the space to really help them. Not right then, maybe tomorrow, in the next practice, but really help them in the way that meets what they're thinking and what they're feeling. I think a lot of parents hope that one day their athlete just won't feel the pressure anymore, right? The pressure will show up and they'll just brush it off. They'll just perform in whatever they want to do. And that's not really how life works. Pressure does not disappear. It changes. It grows up with us. Middle school becomes high school becomes college, sports become careers, games become interviews, championships become closing a big deal at work or leading a difficult meeting, or having a hard conversation with someone you care about. Pressure follows us through life. It grows up with us. It changes from, these ball fields that ultimately, in the grand scheme of life, are low stakes to bigger stakes moments when we're adults, when the relationships matter, when we're, really being the person that we want to be. Pressure just follows us. And that's why I just think youth sports are such an incredible classroom for pressure. They give us one of the safest places to practice responding to it. The goal isn't raising athletes who never feel nervous, who never feel that pressure. The goal is raising someone who can acknowledge the pressure without letting it make their next decision. Think about the athletes you've watched who seem really composed in big moments, right? We see them on TV all the time. They're not fearless, absolutely. They are prepared. They've practiced recovering, they've practiced resetting, they've learned to trust themselves enough to take the next action. Those aren't just athletic skills, those are leadership behaviors, and they'll serve them long after the final whistle. One of the reasons I care so much about this topic is because I've seen where these patterns often go. Before Lead the Game, one of my roles was serving as the client-facing executive for North America in a customer support organization, which is a really fancy way of saying when something went terribly wrong with one of our biggest customers, I was usually the person handling the escalation and the executive conversation. I'm the one that got yelled at the end of the day. Pressure was part of the job. Sometimes people ask me after, those big moments is like, how on earth did you stay calm in that conversation? Like that guy was really, laying into you and this isn't your fault. This isn't really anything to do with you. Like, how do you stay so calm? And really, I learned the pieces of it years before I ever stepped into the job market, before I ever stepped into the corporate world, right? I learned it standing in middle school basketball tryouts, hoping I'd make the team, knowing there was a good chance I wouldn't. I learned it walking onto a stage before a dance recital, trying to remember 7 different routines in front of hundreds of people. Checking into a varsity basketball game as a sophomore, knowing this might be my only chance to prove I belonged on the court. Those moments didn't just teach me how to play sports or how to compete. They taught me how to respond when something mattered to me. And that's why I believe youth sports are about so much more than the game. The athlete who learns how to stay present, recover quickly, and trust their preparation doesn't just become a better competitor, they're building behaviors they'll rely on for the rest of their life. One thing I always want parents and coaches to remember is that there's no single formula for handling pressure or really handling any of the difficult moments in a game or in competition. Two athletes can experience the exact same moment, the exact same mistake, and have completely different responses. One becomes quiet, another becomes emotional, one plays cautiously, another rushes everything. The pressure may be the same, but the behavior isn't. And that's why I'm always encouraging parents and coaches to become students of their athletes. Watch closely, get curious, notice the patterns. Because when you stop asking, how do I help them not feel pressure, and start asking them, what is this pressure revealing about their current skills? Everything changes. You stop chasing quick fixes. You start seeing opportunities for development, and that's where the real powerful work begins. So, this week, whether you're sitting in the bleachers, standing on the sideline, driving home after a game, I want to leave you with one question. What is pressure revealing? Not about the score, not about whether your athlete is good enough, not about all the pressure of the future and how they perform today and what that might mean for later, but just about the behaviors they're developing. What are those patterns? What does that look like? Because those moments, the ones that make us want to step in and rescue them, are often the moments with the greatest opportunity for growth. Pressure isn't the obstacle, it's information. It reveals behavior. Those behaviors reveal patterns. And when we learn to recognize those patterns, we gain a roadmap for development. So thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. If this episode made you think differently about pressure, I'd love for you to share it with another parent or coach who could use a reminder. And until next time, keep paying attention because sports reveal so much more than the scoreboard. They reveal who our athletes are becoming.